I'm gonna turn my light on real quick, so I'm gonna go off.
Go for it. I'll be loading. All right, guys, so it looks like we are live and going. We are all set up. Welcome to our third episode of Corona Hour with Paradise and Lisette. So as you guys know, I'm Lisette. I'm a licensed psychologist and I practice in Florida. I specialize in anxiety conditions, OCD, and eating disorders. And I am happy to be here meeting with you guys on a Friday afternoon. Hopefully you guys are hanging in there. This is, I don't know, whatever number week of quarantine, but four, like
For me, 4.
Okay. I lost count, I think, at this time, but glad to be here. Yeah.
And I'm Paradise. I am a journalist based up in New York, and I have been quarantined for 29 days. I have been counting. And I've been covering the coronavirus since January. So since the way beginning, and yeah, I'm excited to be here. And we're going to be talking about trauma today. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, same here, definitely. So we want to welcome our guest speaker for today. This is Dr. Michelle Stoyell. And she is a licensed psychologist in Florida and also Ohio. She's a bilingual therapist, and she specializes in OCD and anxiety conditions. And also she's had a long history of treating trauma. So she is very much excited to share with us a lot about how COVID is affecting people with trauma and other pieces that go together into that whole thing. So welcome, Dr. Stoyell. We're very happy to have you.
Well, thank you both for having me. Very happy to be here. I would also agree with you that I am a little lost on how long I've been in quarantine.
Right? It's like, I think it's been so many weeks at this point, but they kind of blur a little bit. That's for sure. That's for sure. But I think it was very interesting. I think in the couple of talks that we've had, we've kind of glanced at the topic of trauma, but we haven't really dug very deep. But it seems to be something that keeps popping up in the media. We've seen different articles kind of popping up on our news feeds. I'm sure you guys are also noticing. And so I thought it was important that be something that we would like address.
Yeah.
So one of the things I think we want to do, like pay attention to is how, would you talk to us about how is it that people are going through, people who are going through all of this, how do you think that they are reacting in terms of trauma and grief?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah. So, it's interesting. I think it's something that, I wouldn't say that everyone is, responding it to in a same way. There's different ways that people might be responding, but, one thing that I would like to highlight is that I am in agreement. I was reading the American Psychological Association, and, people's response to COVID-19 and how it's not just an epidemiological crisis, but also a psychological crisis. Think about it. People are, struggling with a lot of loss in many different ways. Whether it be your sense of safety crisis, but also a psychological crisis. Whether it be your sense of normalcy, so people not being able to go to work, having to, have their kids stay at home and taking care of the kids while they can't go to class, having to go through this whole social distancing, the difficulties with, being fearful about financial security. A lot of people have lost their jobs. And obviously, the fear of illness, maybe having someone that actually has gotten sick from COVID, and also, potential death. So I think as, a society, the world is collectively grieving. I would agree with that. So, in terms of trauma, if you like, well, you also asked, how are people responding to the crisis? So some things that I would say is that, whenever there's a crisis, it's natural to have, some type of reaction to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, some people initially might find themselves, responding with denial, maybe with shock. Some other people might have some difficulties with experiencing like a lot of anxiety, irritability, intense sadness. Some people might find themselves, having some difficulties with sleep, whether that is, struggling waking up in the middle of the night, or
Mm-hmm.
whether that is, sleeping more than often, sleeping during the day. Um, you might find people experiencing difficulties with appetite, whether that is increased appetite, decreased appetite. Some people, depending on what they've gone through, might be experiencing some flashbacks, some intrusive memories. They might be experiencing an impact in their relationships with others.
Hmm.
And some people might also experience some physical symptoms, whether that is nausea, headaches, rapid heartbeat, feeling dizzy, shallow breathing, sweating, etc. And also, some other things that might happen is that, some people might be experiencing some difficulties with concentration, which complicates things, right? Because some people might be working at home, and
Mm-hmm.
having to deal with all of this. So, but the thing is, though, I would say too that some people are a little bit more vulnerable than others during these times.
Who would those people be? Like, who are more
Yeah.
vulnerable?
Yeah. So I would say, in society, some people, might sort of hold a little like more power than others, and so like during a natural disaster such as COVID-19. I don't know if you agree with it being a natural disaster, but I would call it one.
Mm-hmm.
It counts. It's natural. It's a
Yeah,
disaster. Yeah, it goes.
I guess, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
So
both.
some
Check,
things,
check.
exactly, check. So some things that, some people that might, and historically have experienced difficulties with natural disasters are people with, low social economic status, undocumented individuals. So think about undocumented individuals, right? So for one, they might be fearful of being deported if they're going and asking for help. People whose language is not English as a first language. Think, in many parts of the country, people don't have access to the internet and things like that. All the news might be in English, and so that might be difficult. It might also be difficult being able to communicate to doctors. The elderly is also a vulnerable population.
For sure.
Individuals with disabilities, individuals with severe mental illness, the homeless
How would all these
population.
groups experience this trauma? Are they experiencing it differently? I know you said they're a little vulnerable to it,
Mhm.
but what happens with that vulnerability?
Well, I would say, it just, makes them more susceptible to be able to um, get the resources
Mm-hmm. That's what I was
to
thinking
help them
too.
cope,
Mm-hmm. I
right?
was thinking in terms of like the accessibility to resources, accessibility to help, the amount of resources they might need also. Because it's not the same for someone who's like in their 30s to know how to like use Amazon and get themselves like some groceries to the door, than someone who is obviously like homeless or who is elderly and doesn't know how to access that. And I could see that being impactful and maybe increasing anxiety and therefore more prone to like trauma, like you were mentioning, Dr. Stoyell.
Mm-hmm.
Could this vulnerability these people have to trauma affect their reaction to what's going on? Like, could they be getting their news from unreliable sources? Could they be maybe in denial about the seriousness of everything going on because they're just maybe not have access to that news? Or they just think that I don't know if I'm making this up or not, but
Mhm.
maybe something happens, it's if I believe it's not happening, it's not going to happen to me and I'm safe.
Mhm.
Mm.
Is that happening to people? Do you see that being an issue for people who are this vulnerable, even people who aren't this vulnerable? Is it a sense of trauma to go into your little shelter and say, no, everything is fine?
Mhm. Well, I would say that definitely the lack of resources would make them maybe get, the news from other sources, like word of mouth.
Mhm.
And one thing that I was going to recommend, is that in terms of dealing with the situation is that we need to be looking at reliable sources,
Mhm.
whether that be the CDC or the WHO. We really need to be careful in terms of where we are gathering our information, because there's a lot of confusing and conflicting information out there.
You said something interesting though. You said something about like people are grieving this,
Hmm.
and you kind of mentioned the stages of loss. Are people going through that as if they've lost a Like, are they grieving their normal lives? I guess is what I'm asking. Is that what people are grieving?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that is, grief doesn't have to be about, a death. It can be about any type of loss. And there
And
certainly is a lot right now.
Mm.
during a pandemic like this, I mean,
Mhm.
could you say that a lot of people, because a lot of people are going through this trauma, what are their typical reactions to this crisis? I know you guys were talking about this a little bit beforehand, and you said that kids may be reacting differently from adults. How are each group reacting? Because I'm thinking everyone is home right now. Everyone is very high anxiety. Everyone's
Mhm.
very high stressed. And I think that in a normal life situation, I could be stressed out and I talk to my mom, or my mom talks to me, or something happens. But now everyone's on the same page. No one has the answers.
Hmm.
How is that manifesting itself?
Hmm. So yeah, one thing that we were talking about was like the difference between how adults might respond versus children, right?
Mhm.
And something that we were talking about was, that kids, they might respond more like with, irritability. Their behavior might be changing in sort of like slight ways, and maybe they might not necessarily be, some may not necessarily be as verbal about,
Mhm.
being worried about what's happening. They really don't necessarily have the language to be able to describe their feelings. um they might find themselves, some kids, they're like pretty little ones, kids that, might have already learned to, go to the bathroom, might have a little bit of a regression in as well, um with that. Then, you might have some similarities, with changes in appetite and sleep and things like that. You might have some kids that are asking a lot and repetitive type questions about, what is going on. Really might depend,
Like,
but
when can we go outside? When can we do this? Why am I not
Yeah.
at
yeah, or
school? Yeah.
really not understanding really too. And that might also create conflict with the parents. I actually have seen that, where, one of the kids might, just insist on like, I want to go see my friends, I want to go see my friends, and
Yeah.
yeah, and then the parent being very afraid, you know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and I'm thinking also for the parents, it's probably strain on your relationship.
Hmm.
So, I mean, 'cause normal life, I guess I need to stop using that phrase, but you have some distance with your spouse. You go to work, they go to work, you're outside from each other, and then you can kind of talk about your days. Now
Right.
your day is together all day.
All
Yeah.
day.
Totally different type of dynamic.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we're definitely seeing that in terms of like domestic abuse. Unfortunately, we're seeing that that's also like on the rise, and we know
Yes.
that that is often like a huge trigger of trauma for a lot of people,
Yeah.
because those situations where normally they could escape to work for the day, people are often like stuck at home. And I like there's a lot of movement. I don't know if you guys have seen of like people asking like, oh, text me if you need like mascara, and that's code word for like, you need me to call the authorities.
Mm.
And I love that people are being aware of that, because that's, I think, another population we need to think about how they're reacting in terms of like the situation, possible trauma coming up. I think that's another vulnerable piece.
Absolutely. And I would say also with, you know, an increase, and I don't know if you've seen, but there's been an increase in like the use of substances, you know,
Mhm.
But
people are
liquor stores
smoking
are
a
still
lot.
open, so
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like, you know, they're having a
True.
party with the increase in how much, you know, people are buying alcohol. And
Mhm.
so, you know,
Mhm.
you see with that increase, if people are abusing the substance, that, you know, there might be an increase also with the domestic violence aspect of things.
No, so with trauma, does PTSD fall into that umbrella?
Right. So let me differentiate that a little bit, right? So trauma is just like an emotional response to any terrible event, you know, such as what is going on right now. Um, and so, you know, it's just basically something that, you know, human beings might experience versus PTSD, which is post traumatic stress disorder,
Mhm.
is actually, you know, one way that it's been conceptualized, and I really like, is that it's actually a problem in recovery, right? So because, you know, people with that have experienced trauma, it's very common to have like similar responses to what someone with PTSD would have. The difference is that really, um, people are able to recover from it. It lasts a very much shorter time, you know. And so the people that develop PTSD get stuck in those responses, right?
That
And
makes
it's sort of,
sense.
yeah, and so it kind of changes, you know, the way that you perceive the world, the way that you perceive yourself, the way that you perceive other people. And yeah.
And I think, Dr. Stoll, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's some research to show that when people experience trauma, being able to process it sooner than later can be helpful in preventing this kind of like ongoing PTSD type responses.
Right. So what I would say, okay, one thing that we do want to be careful though is that while the experience of trauma is happening, the very immediate kind of way, it's actually one thing that is recommended is to do more like a psychological first aid, you know? And
What
so
is
you're
that?
not, psychological first aid is more just like, you know, kind of responding to the emotions, responding to ways of coping, things like that, right? Versus actually going and doing like trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder therapy, right? Because the thing is that not everyone is going to develop PTSD, right? And so once, you know, some time has gone from the actual traumatic event or events, then you would want to, you know, do some trauma therapy or PTSD type therapy.
Mhm.
And some of the recommended gold standard trauma therapies are um, prolonged exposure therapy and cognitive processing therapy.
Definitely. That's when you would kind of like like really jump in to dealing with those, situations, like once PTSD is present. But
Yes,
I like the idea of like psychological first aid, which I think
yes,
that in the time that we're in, I think it's kind of being destigmatized quite a bit, I think, in
Totally.
some regard,
absolutely.
to seek help, the importance of mental health. I mean, we're seeing it like, I don't know, Dr. So, but like my adolescents are like, oh, hold on, I gotta tell my friend I'm with my therapist, and like they'll like kind of be
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm with
I
my
love
therapist.
that.
And I know, like you go do that,
They're
yeah,
cool.
normalize this experience, guys. I love that the newer generation is kind of like taking it on as like a strength more than like a weakness, and in some kids I've seen that. I can't say for everybody,
But all
but
the memes have been about see a therapist lately, right? I mean, that is, I think we're getting that positive reinforcement from social media too, especially the kids are.
Yeah.
right, like the what was it like? So what do we do when we're sad? Type of memes.
Yeah.
Love this.
But it is
That's so funny.
actually, it's great, that people are being more open and, having less stigma about it, because it, potentially being able to see a therapist is going to help and not avoiding. And usually what tends to lead to post-traumatic stress disorder kind of response is the avoidance.
So if I feel like I am or someone in my household is having these trauma responses to
Mhm.
everything happening, then seeing a therapist now and kind of going in that now and do that mental health band-aid now can, I don't want to say prevent PTSD, but it can maybe lessen my chances of developing that in the future if this happens again, or or somewhere down the line, right? Or am I wrong about saying that? So like be aware of your mental health now.
It's important to be aware of the mental health, like from right now, and as long as this lasts, and then after, for sure.
Hmm.
So
And
what
then the
is
more that,
like, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I know, I was just gonna mention, like, the more that we tend to suppress things, they do turn to come back with a vengeance, right? We know that for a lot of things that we would normally put off or avoid and things like that. But if we start to work on, being in touch with what's going on here today, that, yeah, like we'll be more open to, working on maybe bigger challenges in the future.
Hmm. Yeah.
So like, do you mean like mental health challenges? Like if I'm willing to work on this now, maybe I'll like, yeah, you know what? I tackled that before, I can do it again, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Huh. So like, how does acute stress disorder play into all this now? And I'm throwing a bunch of like definitions at you, but
Yeah,
I'm just curious,
definitely.
how does that play in now?
So acute stress disorder is actually like very similar to what PTSD would be, but the
Mhm.
difference is just the length of time.
Okay.
So acute stress disorder, could be classified like once the traumatic experience is like done with, that 3 to 1 month period. Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, just to go back to grief real quick, because I know we're grieving, because there is also the issue right now of real grief, of, I'm gonna say real grief, I'm so sorry for saying that, but grief of a loss of a loved one. Because one of the things that is happening with COVID is funerals are not the same anymore. You know, we can't grieve in the same way that we used to because we can't go through those rituals. I think that a lot of us grew up with, of going
Yeah.
to the funeral, of being around loved ones. That's all taken from us. So now there are a lot of people who are grieving alone, and not just from people who die of the virus, but you could have a loved one who just died of old age, or they were sick from something else.
Yes.
How do you grieve in this light? Are there any tips we can give people on how to grieve in this new reality? And could that develop into another trauma of someone? Like, oh, I just lost a loved one, and I don't know how to mourn them. I never mourned them right.
Hmm. Yeah, so definitely what you point out is something very important. And then also depending on where the person might be, this is very complicated grief. It's not like our regular grief, not that grief is regular in any way, but it's not like the
Like what we're
common
used
kind of
to.
Simplified a little, isn't it? I mean, like this is
yeah,
like
yeah.
grief on steroids.
Yeah, exactly. It's just very complex. As societies, different cultures have their different ways of grieving, and unfortunately, we're not being able to grieve the way that we usually would. So some things that I've been recommending people to do is to find some kind of like creative ways in which they can help, like sort of like in a symbolic way grieve the
Mm-hmm.
person, right? So whether it be like making an album for the person, whether it be journaling, whether it be creating like a music list, just creating like some kind of like crafts, for the person. Just, there's a lot of ways in which one could be creative with it. That's on that side of things. Then, we want to be doing some just like regular kind of like taking care of ourselves in the way that we're coping, right? So being able to talk to family and friends. You know, obviously we're having to go through this world of social distancing, but
Mm.
you know, we're very fortunate in this time and age to be able to do what we're doing right now, and you know, talk to each other through video conferencing, you know, and so being, or through the telephone, you know, um, and you know, being, you know, open as one can be with how one is feeling, acknowledging and accepting the feelings that one is having. Also, I would say, you know, listening to the way that your body and your mind is responding to everything. um, you know, being able to rest when you're tired, um, but not to the extreme where you're like letting yourself sleep for hours or anything like that. You want to maintain a little bit of a regular daily routine, you know, in terms of like
Mhm.
your eating, your sleep, you know, taking care of the kids, you know, if you have kids, or doing work. And if you do need a break, though, also letting other people know that you need a break.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm.
It sounds
it's
like a lot of these ways that you're grieving a person is, it looks like a lot of these tips could actually work for dealing with the trauma of everything going on too, right? I mean, there's a lot
absolutely,
of parallels to this. The journaling, the making the
absolutely,
album, acknowledging your feelings, these all
yeah,
go together, don't they?
absolutely. There is actually like not much of a difference in terms of just regular ways of coping, you know. But yes, the aspect of doing something symbolic for the person, I think would be something important, you know, especially
Mhm.
not being able to do what one would regularly do.
And I think it's kind of deep down, it's like how I said that we're giving ourselves the best chances of kind of maneuvering through something that is difficult, is sad, could be traumatic in many ways. Like you guys were mentioning at the beginning of our talk, in some regard, this is almost like a collective trauma for a lot of people, for like the world, you know. And so to acknowledge is, I think, one of the biggest steps, to acknowledge that there is hurt and that needs to be paid attention to. Um, so not only, like you were saying, Paradise, for like an everyday thing, but if we are to lose someone, you know, to acknowledge that it is saddening and it is a certain loss, and
Mhm.
moving towards like, how do I take good care of myself while I go through this, even to that degree.
Right.
And one of the things I wanted to mention, you guys, I don't know if you saw, there's been a lot of these like almost like toxic productivity type of like articles and things like
Yeah.
that
Yes.
going around. And I was curious to hear your thoughts on like the impact of that on people and like trauma specifically,
Yeah.
given that, you know, it sounds to kind of like what you were talking about, Dr. Stoyell, like giving yourself like the space to be versus
Mhm.
like pushing yourself in this almost like perfectionistic way, right?
Yeah.
So if I
Yeah.
don't know how to make bread at the end of this, am I okay?
That is the question. That is what we're here to answer, actually. Yes.
Yeah, that's a really good point because, you know, there has been a lot of pressure. I think, you know, people posting on social media that, you know, this is the time to be extra productive. And, you know, this can be very tempting for people, especially, you know, as you mentioned, you know, people that are experiencing a lot of trauma, you know, it's tempting to distract yourself and not have to think at all about the person. Yeah, it's good to have a little bit of a balance, right? Where you're taking care of yourself and, you know, doing other things. But if you're just on go, 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 go kind of mode, it's not going to let you be able to process all that you've gone through.
And you think
Very
that kind of with people feeling like, I failed. I'm just not good enough. I was supposed to lose
true.
10 pounds and I was supposed to like learn how to speak Spanish. And now I don't know how to do any of this and I wasted my time.
Oh my goodness.
Mm.
I'm feeling overwhelmed just hearing you.
Right? I'm like, I'm supposed to do everything. Listen, I buy myself a Lego set once a week and I'm happy when I make that. That is my little accomplishment.
Yeah.
And I am a huge fan of tiny victories because I think it makes us all feel good.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you know what? Today I am going to make my Legos, or I'm going to make myself a really good breakfast. And that is going to be my accomplishment for today.
Yeah.
And
Beautiful.
it doesn't have to be something dramatic like learning a whole new language or, getting a whole new
Oh goodness.
skill. Yeah, it's something that you do well, like I've never made this meal before. I'm going to do it. Or I love this meal. I'm going to do it.
Yes. So what we call that is building mastery, right?
Yes,
You know,
I am building mastery.
exactly, right? And it can be just a little small thing that will make you feel motivated for the day, but it doesn't have to be like 24/7, let's go, 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 go.
Mhm.
I think that's where the toxic positivity comes in,
Yeah.
because we do get bombarded with, oh well, you always have to say yes. Why aren't you always moving? And before we used to always counter our productivity by, well, I'm busy. I gotta go here, then I gotta go there, then I got this meeting, then I got this thing. Now we're home. We don't gotta go anywhere. And it's, well, all this stuff that I knew that made me a productive member of society is gone.
Hmm.
So now it's just me at home. Am I productive? And could that feeling of lack of productivity add to my trauma of all this? Could that lead on to my feelings of, not feeling a sense of normalcy anymore and feeling like unstable?
Well, it could impact the way that you are viewing yourself, depending on how you're thinking about it,
So
right?
that self-esteem issue could come in.
Well,
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's definitely a way in which, you are, yeah, just viewing, what you're doing as opposed to, because people might respond to it in a very different way. Some people might give themselves the time to adjust, and be like, hey, like this, there's a lot
Yep.
going on. Like
Mhm.
I need to sort of like settle myself, um,
Absolutely.
and another person might think, oh my gosh, like this means that I'm a failure, um, I suck,
How do you erase that thought? Like, if I'm like, I'm a failure right now, I didn't do what I wanted to do. What do you tell that person? What can I tell myself if I'm feeling that way?
I would ask you, first of all, like, why do you feel like that's what you need to do? Where's that coming from? Who made that rule happen?
Well, the internet's telling me, everyone's telling me that I need to do this stuff and I'm not doing this stuff.
Sure, but is that something that you think you need to do?
So it's like internalize it to myself, right? Like, do I need to do this? Like, who am I pleasing here? Am I pleasing myself or someone's idea of what I should do?
Yeah. How is this helping you? How's this way of thinking helping you?
Mhm.
Okay, is this helping me or is this hindering my progress? How would I know the difference if I'm so far in there that I'm like, I don't know, is this helping? Like, shouldn't I be doing that? I don't know. Like, I guess, how do I come to that realization?
I think, first of all,
This is helpful.
Paris, I just want to put it out there that is a very normal response that a lot of people are having.
Okay,
As
that's
you,
what I was getting at. Like, am I alone?
N- Not at all. I mean, I will tell you, I've had this too. Am I being like productive enough? And not only in that, but also effective enough. Like, I know as a therapist right now, it's like I want to make sure that I'm giving the best of me to all of my clients and patients, whatever. And so in many ways, I kind of have to like check in for a minute and be like, yes, like it's all in the context stuff. We're also going through like this pandemic that we've never gone through before, and like we don't know how to like manage. And it's like, all right, hold on a minute. Like, so we gotta always bring it back to like, what is it that I'm doing to take care of me truly? You know, and this concept of identity, I think that is a very cultural thing also. Like, I am my job,
Right.
like that is my identity. And in many ways, a lot of people have lost their jobs, right? And does that mean that they've lost their identities?
Mhm.
And so I think that's something that we take for granted, that we're not just a worker, you know? We're not just like a relationship, like a boyfriend or a daughter or whatever it might be. We're also this centerpiece that is ourselves.
Right.
And that means we need to nurture that. Our likes and dislikes, our needs most specifically, and in many ways to kind of like pull those strings back, and detach a little bit from all those things that meant that you were good enough.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of self-care love, like it's positive talk back to myself,
Mhm.
like, because I mean, something I do is I make a list for myself in a day of when I'm like working. So whenever I get those moments of like, oh, I didn't do enough, I have all the things I accomplished right there. And they're little things like emailed someone back,
Mhm.
And that can
but
be a huge thing.
yeah, but I can like look at it and be like, oh, I did that. I
Exactly.
checked my emails today. Like that is a thing I did instead of you just mindlessly going through it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
in many ways, asking yourself, is that something that you wanted to do? Not only wanted as you felt like, but wanted in the sense that it's something that contributed to your day.
Yeah.
Is that something that was helpful to you to be a part of?
Mhm.
I was kind of having this dilemma of like, am I resting or am I avoiding? And I think a lot of people might be having this dilemma. I don't know. I hope I'm not the only one. But in many ways, it was like, yeah, I had to kind of like check in, and I was like, am I tired? Am I really like tired? And does my body actually need to be in rest? Or is it that something else is causing me a lot of anxiety and I don't want to do it?
Yeah.
So it's a lot of self-reflection, I think, also.
Yeah. So yeah, and then, I would say also in terms of like should statements, right? Sometimes, we create those should statements and they just like, make us prisoners of our own lives. And so like recognizing that, like who determines what I should do or anyone would have to do. Like in this very second, I could be doing a zillion things. No one says that I should be sitting here and having this conversation with you guys. When I go to work, when I wake up in the morning and I go to work, like nothing really determines that I should be doing that. I do that because it goes with my values.
Mm-hmm. And I love that you brought that up. I think that maybe in like everyday life is not something that we talk about very much. I think that's something that maybe is brought up a lot when people are attentive of mental health, or maybe like going to treatment and differentiating like what your personal values are, and
Mhm.
noticing if your actions are actually like value driven,
Mhm.
or they're based on avoidance or like emotional, like emotionally driven decisions. So that's something that maybe it's important maybe to talk about and distinguish a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah. And then also having some patience with oneself, because sometimes it may be avoidance, you know?
Is that
Yep.
okay? Is it okay if I avoid things?
Sorry?
Like, is some avoidance okay? Like, or no? Okay.
Absolutely. I would say so.
And I mean, since we are stuck in the house a little bit right now, does that contribute to any feelings of trauma that some people may have? Of like maybe feeling trapped, or like if running was my release or being outdoors was my release, like does that contribute in any way? Like just our setting? Like can we do anything to our homes to make it feel more inviting to ourselves, or maybe create a space for yourself?
Mhm. So, I mean, I think what it does is it really contributes to stress, and, not so like having ways, I'm sorry about that, having ways in which one might be able to kind of like, because usually, if one works outside of home, one has a way of distancing themselves from like, okay, here's my work life, and this is like my life out of work. And so
Yeah.
one thing that I think about is that like I try to like create my space where I'm gonna work. And then whenever I'm not working at home, I go somewhere else. But I also
Absolutely.
recognize not everyone might have that luxury, right? Some people might be in like a little efficiency but then, creating other spaces, even if it is a small space, to be able to kind of do some like more like relaxing type activities, maybe sit somewhere else, kind of change things up a little bit. I say maybe that would help with that. And making sure that you're like getting involved with activities that are not just work, you know. um,
Mhm.
whether it be, playing cards, if you have someone, there with you, you could be, playing games, different things like that. But also online, there's, a lot of ways in which one can be creative, and there's online card games. There's Lisette and I have been playing Words with
What y'all
Friends.
playing?
Words with friends. It's words of mouths.
With
You
friends.
But speaking of actually
sure.
card games, and I know you guys are doing it like a healthy card game, but like, could that bring up like if I have past addictions, like gambling or anything like that? Like we mentioned alcoholism earlier. Could this be bringing some of that up out of people? Is that a trauma coping mechanism for some people?
Right. So I'd say nothing in extremes can be.
Right.
Everyone's heard that, but
That's helpful. Yeah.
and if you can recognize it as something that has not been like healthy for you, then you probably don't want to be, jumping on that now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that like with time these do these things become easier or no? Like, I mean, as we're entering week 4 of this week 5, like does it become easier to deal with this with time? Does the week to week change when it comes to dealing with the trauma?
Interesting question.
Sorry.
I don't know, because this is definitely something that is very new to I think most people that are alive.
A lot of us.
And I'm not quite sure that there's anything that has been, I mean, not to my knowledge, that has been written about, well, maybe, what? Yeah, maybe. I wouldn't say that I have the answer to that question, but I do think that it's a really good question to kind of look at. I think it
I
might
was reading something from China. It said like 42% of Chinese citizens said that they have anxiety now after coronavirus, and 16% show that they have signs of depression, have increased their depression level.
Yeah.
And this is just in Wuhan.
Right.
So I'm assuming we're probably going to see, and I know it's a huge assumption, but similar results here.
Yes. Yeah. I would say, I mean, definitely it does put us at more risk for mental health concerns. But what it is that we do in terms of how we cope and take care of ourselves, I think will determine, reducing that rate.
Absolutely. I think from like in many ways, I think like the kind of like message, Dr. Stoyell, is kind of take care of yourself today,
Yes.
and take it day by day at the same time, because and don't take it in a perfectionistic way either. So it's a lot. It really sounds like a lot, but to know that we don't have to do it all complete 100% and perfect, but to be attentive of that process, I think is the most important thing. Because you're right, I think that it is very new and we don't know what it's like to be in a pandemic for weeks at a time. What is it going to bring? But we know that being in front of a stressor for prolonged periods of times can also affect us. So my thought is also, we talk about like adjustment, and different people have different levels of adjustment when it comes to dealing with stressors. And as you were talking about earlier, Dr. Stowe, like vulnerable populations probably don't have as many resources to be able to be more adaptive to the stressors that we're facing, and therefore not be able to like adjust as well. So I think it's kind of like twofold then. For some people, as time goes on, adjustment might be able to kind of kick in, and perhaps they'll be able to manage things a little bit better, make more of a routine, or find that space in the home that feels a little more comfortable. And then for other people, it's more, it can be like, oh my gosh, like how much longer can I take this? It's like I've already spread myself out so thin, and then I still have to for how much more weeks. So I think it's taken into account some of that. And then at the same time, and sorry to kind of keep going on and on, but
this is informative.
I was thinking also at this, when we are talking about like whatever population we're in, the commonality is the paying attention to the here and now, regardless of resources. because the more we try to fight our current experience, the harder it's going to be. Just tying into like our last talk on mindfulness.
Yes, exactly. I was actually thinking about that while you were talking about is, mindfulness, it's very tempting to be thinking about the past and how things used to be in the past, whether that be good or bad, right?
Mhm.
And it's also very tempting to be thinking about the future,
Yeah.
and so, but the difficulty with that is that when we are either in the past or the future, we're not living the present. And that's all that we have to live right now, so that's why I think, if people struggle with that aspect of mindfulness, there's a lot of resources out there, free resources in terms of mindfulness. There's apps, there's Headspace, there's Calm, all kinds of apps, where you can just start learning.
Absolutely. And thank you for pointing that out. I think that maybe a lot of people aren't familiar with resources that are out there for even just having online therapy. Some people
Yep.
may not know that online therapy is available.
What's the line therapy?
Online.
So,
Oh,
online.
online. Sorry, if they said a line. Sorry.
No worries, no worries. But yeah, so a lot of therapists have moved their practices to be like over the computer, and there's different platforms that people are using, and it's opening the doors for people who, again, not having a lot of resources to be able to get some support.
Right.
And after our talk, I'll go ahead and put a couple of links for people to check out. There's a couple of websites that are offering like discounted services or pro bono services if you're a first responder, nurse, or are in the front lines of this. Because we definitely want to be able to help people access care. I think that's going to be one of the main things that's going to help us to not get to the other side, I think, in a trauma state.
Right. And then support groups as well, which are free.
Absolutely.
Lots of them out there. Yeah, and I like that you mentioned also first care responders, because that is also a population that we want to be kind of checking in with. They're going through a lot of hard times right now, having to be at the forefront of everything. Whether it be nurses, medical doctors, police officers. Well, we also have to take care of ourselves as mental health providers, because we're both, taking care of other people, but we also need to be taking care of ourselves. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Even the cashier, I mean, they're not, the other frontline workers,
Yes,
the garbage men, the cashiers, the people who are delivering your mail, these people are, I think there's a sense of security that kind of comes with working in a hospital. Not that I know it's a very traumatic situation, physically, emotionally, but you're talking about a 18-year-old kid who is, who's bagging your groceries, and now he has to go to work every day and risk getting sick to provide for your family.
Yeah.
I think there's a different stress level that comes with, very much being a child and having to be essential now, and just that thought of I am essential for society to run now. I am 18 years old working at Publix and I have to go to work.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, is there any coping mechanisms for those people? Not just the grocery worker and the postal guy, but also the doctors and the nurses and the therapist. Is there, because I'm thinking these people are actually commuting, so they have the luxury of being able to go to work. Is there anything you can do on that commute? Maybe something to tell yourself, a ritual or something to kind of ease your brain on that ride.
I mean, I think some of it might be similar. Oh, where did Lisette go?
Yeah, it says
We lost her.
you're the host now.
Oh, okay.
I guess
She'll be back. I'll check in just to see if I need to invite her back in. But yeah, so she, sorry, got a little distracted there. Yeah, so we were talking about ways that they can cope, right? So I think it would be in some ways very similar, just the difference is that they're out. And yes, they are experiencing added stress because of having to be out and about, so the mindfulness aspect of things, again, I know that there might be a lot of concerns, valid concerns of like, what if I get this, what if I get sick, what if I get my family member sick, lots of what
Yeah.
ifs and a lot of uncertainty, but it can be very tempting to kind of grab onto those thoughts and, kind of like just, kind of ruminate of all
And they
the
manifest an anxiety in you, I guess, right? Like if I'm driving to work and I'm like, oh God, what if I touch something? Did I touch my face just now? And I
right.
just touched it, helped a customer with something. What if I have the virus now? Like,
Right. And so I think, and that's where I would say like, you want to be differentiating like the recommendations of the CDC,
mm-hmm.
And like being careful, because they do need to be careful, while at the same time, like not taking it like the extra mile, where you're constantly, kind of questioning yourself. It's like, well, if I did, it's done. So I need to be present in the moment. And what can I do right now in this moment in order to just, observe what I have around myself,
Is there like, and I like what you said, take into account the CDC's recommendations. Because I know when I'm anxious,
Mhm.
what I do for myself is I'm like, okay, Paradise, what are your facts?
Yeah.
Like what do we know?
Exactly.
So I'm like, all right, I socially distanced. I stayed 6 feet away from everyone today. I did the thing I was supposed to do. Did I wash my hands? Yes. Did I wear my mask? Yes. So I think like these little things that you can maybe check box for yourself,
Mhm.
it helps.
Yeah.
I think that for me, the more I talk to myself, the more I understand my anxiety.
Mhm.
And my biggest hope for people coming out of this whole experience is maybe getting to know your body better, getting to know your responses. And, your goal at the end of quarantine may not be that you know how to bake bread or do something, but it may just be something as simple as, I know now when I am stressed, I like to do blank,
Mhm.
and now you got to know yourself.
I love that.
And
Yeah.
I feel like that's healthy. I don't know if that is healthy, but I feel like that's a healthy, like, that's how I'm like getting out of this anyway.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good perspective.
What are you doing? How are you as a therapist staying sane?
Well, I'm trying to work on being present, being, focused on like the people that I'm caring for. And at the same time, once I'm not, seeing my clients, then, working on, just doing things to care for myself, whether it be, watching a fun show or whether it be I like singing, so I put a
Oh,
little YouTube music and sing along the lyrics, or playing the guitar with my husband. Well, he plays the guitar, I sing.
y'all got a band going on. Okay.
um, I'm not much of a cook, but I've been cooking more.
How are you experiencing the cooking? Because that's something I've been talking to a lot of friends about.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are like, I want to make this, but I have no idea how to do it. Like my mom is like, I only know how to make one type of food. How do
Uh-huh.
I make this type of food? I'm like, well, this is your chance.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
See if you like your own cooking.
it's trial and error, right?
Yeah.
And then, just kind of I guess, being okay with whatever the product is, that's how people learn. It's not going to be perfect, and it's okay if it's not perfect.
I think that's the biggest lesson in whether it be like if this is a traumatic situation, what if you're dealing with anxiety, no matter what, it's stopping the demand of perfection that we have on ourselves. And I think that is a huge lesson to take away from everything is stop thinking that your life you need to do quarantine a certain way. You needed to do life a certain way. There are no rules.
Yes. No such thing.
And I've been telling that to people all day long. I'm like, you know what? You want to eat cookies for breakfast? Do it. There are no rules anymore. Do what makes you happy.
Yeah.
Lisette, you're back.
I am, guys, and I have to access from my phone because my internet is not being happy right now, apparently.
Grr. We're just talking about things to do to make yourself happy, you know, like, and how we need to stop demanding perfection of ourselves coming out of coronavirus and everything.
Absolutely.
Like, your internet is not perfect right now, so you adapted. See, there you go.
Is this good?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Cool. Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have anything to add to that? We're talking about how do you deal with the trauma of all this? How are you coping with all this, Lisette? What are you doing for Lisette? How are you making Lisette happy?
How am I making Lisette happy? Little things like good tea in cute mugs. Shout out to Liz Machado for this really cute mug.
Ooh.
Little things all day. Little things often is what you really helps. Either
Sparks
like
of joy.
calling a friend or spending time with someone you care about, you know, and that means like, you know, giving them a call. We called grandma this morning with our dogs, and then we were talking to her through the through the iPad with the dogs. That was fun.
Grandma can use an iPad. Nice.
Yeah. She likes her dogs, so that's positive, I think.
She calls for the dogs. I get it.
Exactly. She just wants to see them. It's like, screw you guys.
Yeah, I think the checking in is so important, you know?
Yeah, one thing I love about this is like you're hearing from people that you haven't heard from in like years, you know, or it's like the new social acceptable icebreaker now is, how are you doing?
It's true.
And I hope we can answer like honestly. I feel like, you know, it's like so typical of like, oh good, how are you? You know, but like sometimes like it's okay to be like, you know what, today has sucked. You know, and today I needed more support. Like that's okay.
I have made it a point actually to be more honest when I answer that question. So I don't do the, oh no, I'm good anymore. I'm just like, you asked. So today I am feeling. I'm like, you know, we had time. Where are you going?
Absolutely. And I hope we continue that, guys. I hope that that is something that we can absolutely give each other space for. You know, that it's a right to really talk about like what is going on. And one thing I want to put out there is that right now, yes, it's good to reach out to friends, but we don't have to make it so like we get everything from one friend. You know, it's okay to have one friend to just go and gossip with, you know, one friend that is more like that I'm going to call you and cry about stuff with. You know, it's kind of like finding like who your tribe is in a little bit of a way.
Like there's different types of loves, right? Some people give you some type of love and that another person might not be able to give you, you know?
Exactly. So guys, we are coming to the end of our talk for today. So first and foremost, just want to thank Dr. Stoyell for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's so helpful. Thank you.
It's really great to have you. Thank you so much. And so, of course, is there anywhere where you'd like people to reach you? If they have any questions or anything like that, Dr. Stoyell, you can always post an email if you'd like afterwards on the talk.
Yeah, well, yeah, they can reach me at Neurobehavioral Institute, 954-217-1757.
Thank you. Very much appreciate that. And so I'll just kind of touch base for next time. So we will see you guys again next Friday. We will have our guest speaker, Dr. Joyce Sampali, joining us. She is a licensed psychologist in Florida and she works in Miami. She's bilingual. She's a wonderful, wonderful person and a great friend.
And we're talking about OCD.
Yes. So she does specialize in OCD and anxiety conditions. So she will be talking about the impact of coronavirus on OCD, which is very interesting. And also how the media is also flipping some things around that we don't like very much. I know Paradise, you probably know about that much more than I do.
I do my best.
Cool.
I'm not perfect. I do my best.
None of us, for sure. Awesome. So look forward to seeing everybody for next Friday, 5:30 in our Corona Hour with Paradise and Lisette. I hope to hear, any questions that you guys may have. Please feel free to reach us, write us before the event. And even if you guys have any specific topics you want us to cover, I think we'll definitely be open to getting our expert speakers coming on like we've done so far, and maybe addressing some of these different topics.
Yes, please. I'm a nerd. I like to learn from other nerds. So please let me know.
Exactly. All right. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us. It's been wonderful. And we'll see you guys next Friday. Bye, everybody.
Bye.